Being an entrepreneur is about way more than just having a skill set or a product that you can sell. In fact, I'd say that's the biggest misconception that there is about entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur and a business owner is about building a successful and sustainable business that is effective and efficient, right? And that's why today we're talking to Darren Magarro from the DSM Group, and he's going to tell us all about how he got started and how he's grown a very successful traditional marketing agency here in Mahwah, New Jersey. So if you're an entrepreneur or small business owner who's ready to build a real business and take things to the next level, especially with your leadership, this is a must watch for you. Because in this episode, you're going to learn the two most important skills that every entrepreneur needs to build a successful organization, what mistakes to avoid when you're hiring your first, your third, even your 20th employee. We're going to go over how to know when it's time to give up control, especially because you've gotten so used to having control, but giving up that control so that the business can grow bigger and faster without you and you aren't a bottleneck in any of the scenarios. How to build an executive team like an NFL general manager, the importance of foundational strategies and systems in achieving success together as a growing team, plus a ton more as always. This episode is stacked with golden nuggets about building a successful business, being a great leader, hiring a great team, and really how to be a successful entrepreneur and build a successful organization. So without further ado, I'm Todd. Welcome to the Growth Suite. Here's my conversation with Darren. All right, Darren, welcome to Growth Suite TV. I'm excited to have you here talking today about entrepreneurship and leadership from the trenches and how to successfully build a business. From the business side of things, normally we're talking about marketing and sales, but today we're going to be talking about, business and team and leadership stuff. So, why don't you give a little introduction of who you are, what your business is, and then kind of tell us the story about how you got started.
What up, Growth Suite? Todd, thanks for having me. Starting DSM, this is the Jerry Maguire story without sort of Tom Cruise, good-looking Tom Cruise telling the story. DSM started back in 2007. I had an idea similar to probably some of the ideas that you had with regards to there's got to be a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. So I came off of a 5-year career in New York for a big agency working on clients like Toyota, but doing primarily media buying. It was strictly television, all media buying, Toyota, Lexus, Scion, Jim Beam, Puma. Mm-hmm. Got married in 2005 and decided I was going to move out to Paramus, another agency in Paramus. And from there, I was going to be able to create, have a 6-figure salary and be able to work 10 minutes from my house under the auspices that I was going to be working on local car dealerships. So I didn't have to travel. At the time when I left New York, I was traveling back and forth from Torrance, California from Toyota. Yeah. There were 2 brothers who owned the agency. The one wanted me to work on local car dealerships or in New Jersey. The other one, they had just gotten a T-Mobile co-op. And he decided that I was going to travel to Florida and Texas. So everything that I didn't want, it ended up being that's where I was actually going. So on a Friday, I was on my way back from Washington, D.C. on a train, got into Penn Station in Newark, and had a car, town car, take me home. And I called the brother that had me, working down in D.C., and basically I said, I'll become the internal media buyer for the agency so all the sales guys can sell. And he was like, well, and I said, split the commissions, between the AE and myself. And he was like, well, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, I don't really want to be traveling all over the country doing this and not making more money. So I'm going to start my own business. Now, the key to this story is that my wife and my mother-in-law were down in Jupiter, Florida on vacation. So I quit my 6-figure salary without my wife and mother, which was awesome. So
the easiest way to handle objections is to avoid them. So, that's
well, and the next part of the story. So so this is probably like 4:00 on a Friday. Got off the train, got in the town car, went to Stop and Shop to get a rotisserie chicken, and went to Wine and Spirit to get a 6-pack of beer of IPAs. And I waited for my wife to call me that night. And I was sitting there and I had a few beers and the whole thing. And I'll never forget it. She called me and she's like, oh, how was work? How was DC? I was like, oh, it was great. She's like, I was like, I am going to start my own ad agency. And Samantha said to me, that's great. Like, what do you have a business plan, 6,
Right.
9 months a year?
Yeah.
And I go, no, I'm starting Monday. I already went. Yeah. So my Jerry Maguire story was, instead of carrying a goldfish out of the office, I went to, I bought my laptop, went to IKEA. The agency is right over by IKEA by Garden State Plaza.
Yep.
And I walked in there, I bought a desk and a garbage can and a chair, and I was like, I'm on my way.
That's great.
Yeah. And I went home, started that night, and just sat down at a computer. I had no clients. I had $5,000 in savings, and I had a laptop. And here we are almost 12 years later, 16 clients, new office space up in Mahwah. But I really... what I would say to the Growth Suite fans out there, my way is probably not the best way to do it. I sort of was at a place in my life, I wasn't paying a mortgage. We didn't have kids. So I had the flexibility to do it. And, my wife works for a family business, and thank God for her, because I didn't take a salary my first 3 years. And she really was sort of she allowed me the flexibility to be able to start the business, give me a runway to be able to build it. And over 3 years, we became $1 million agency, on the top line, within 3 years. So,
and you guys have, you've racked up a ton of awards over there and all that kind of good stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, my story, I won't get into it right now for the episode, but is, I handed in my 2-week notice, and I was out the week before Memorial Day, and then I spent the summer living down in Manasquan, which is where I ended up meeting my wife. So
Guantanamo, baby.
Exactly. So yeah, so it's sometimes you just got to take the leap of faith, right? And it's funny because some people talk about, like, how can you, it's so scary to go out and quit your job and start your own business, weren't you afraid or whatever? And, like, the thing that scares me is being in a cubicle for 50 years, right? Yep. And so it's funny, it wasn't necessarily like courage for me that made me go out and leave. It was actually, it was still the fear or whatever, but, like, also the idea of, like, I don't want, like, this isn't it. Like, this is wrong. It's not, this isn't how things should be going. And I was working at a giant corporation at the time. So, sometimes you do just got to take the step and make things happen. And, that's not always the right way to do it. You got to make sure you can cover your own ass. But, sometimes people wait too long and they think, like, oh yeah, I'll try and do it on the side for 6 months or 9 months, and I'll plan out and I'll, save for a year and this and that, and then a year comes, but then they're still making excuses. So you just get whatever can get you to take action and do it is what you got to do. In
my humble opinion, a side hustle for 6 months, it doesn't.
Right.
If you don't apply yourself 100%, the first 3 years of DSM, if I didn't apply myself 100% and know that I had no safety net, I wouldn't have did it. I just wouldn't have done it.
Right.
I had a lot of factors in my life at the time that allowed me to do that, which was great.
Right.
But one of the biggest things, the people that know me really well, one of the biggest things for me has always been, while my wife gave me the flexibility to be able to do this, gave me sort of the launching pad.
Yeah.
I was able to take even a little bit of a salary within the first 12 months. It's the way it all worked out. So
right.
I'm more chuck the grenade and see what happens.
Right. And for the record, I don't think you had any kids at the time. I wasn't even with my wife yet. Right. So,
right. But it's a matter of making sure, look, if you have the drive to do it, you'll figure it out.
Right.
Similar to you and what you're saying, I couldn't be the person. The cubicle didn't scare me so much. I enjoyed my time at, like, Zenith and the agencies that I worked at. I loved it. I thought there was a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And for the people that know me, I get very restless. If I think that there's a better way, and I'm learning this as I grow. As I've now 12 years into this journey,
Yeah.
I've learned how to quell it a little bit because, what my biggest strength I feel is that understanding that if I was going to build something bigger than myself,
Yeah.
again, I needed to know what my strengths were and what my weaknesses are. I think it's every entrepreneur. I think it's the biggest asset that I have.
Yeah.
I'm not the world's best marketer. Marketing is not what. If it were up to me, I'd be the general manager of the Green Bay Packers. Like that's my dream. Like sports is what I love.
Yeah.
Marketing is a means to an end for me. So, but what I found is that there's a lot of great marketers, and me trying to bring them on, whether it's Ryerson or Christine or Zinka or Leon or anybody that's here at DSM now, right. 16 people strong. Understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then putting people in place. It's almost like saying you want to be the ugliest house on the block.
Right. Well, and that is being the general manager of a great team, right? I mean, it's the same things that the guys have to do to build a great team in the NFL. It's the same thing that entrepreneurs need to do to build a business. And, we were talking offline real quick about like how I define entrepreneurship as, an entrepreneur's product is the business, right? And so your product is building the DSM business and putting all those people in place based on strengths and weaknesses and all that stuff. So, tell me about like, how do you define entrepreneurship, and, what do you think are some misconceptions people have when they're first getting started?
I define entrepreneurship as the craziest journey I've ever been on in my life. The biggest strength of an entrepreneur, there's two of the biggest strengths. The first, and I'm talking specifically for myself because I have a very hard time putting myself in other people's shoes and having other people put themselves in my shoes. Mm-hmm. Understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think, is paramount because that'll help you build the team around you that will help you be successful. I have a wonderful team of marketers here, and that's why we're so successful. The other part of it is that if you're going to take the lead of the ship, if you're going to captain the ship, you better be able to yoke up and know that you're going to get none of the credit. And when the shit hits the fan, you're going to have to be the one to yoke up and take that on the chin like a champ.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain type of person that can do that really well. You have to be that type of person. If you're not that type of person, it's going to be very difficult, especially as you build out an organization. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to have like 2 or 3 people, it's easier because you could probably be, you did it with, Tresnik. Like you saw it very early that's not how you didn't see it scale.
Right.
I didn't have that choice because we grew 300% over the last 6 years. Yeah. It went from all of a sudden, it was like throwing water on like Gizmo. Like it turned into like all of a sudden you'd show up at DSM and like there'd be like 3 more people, and it got to a point, it got to such a cadence that I'd be like, who are these people? Like I don't even know them really well. It was like we were hiring interns after like 2 months. I didn't even get a chance to know the interns. Yeah. So, you're finding that balance, but I think those are the 2 biggest strengths for any entrepreneur, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then being able to shoulder the load, because I think that there's a lot of people who want to be a part of a team, but they don't want to captain. They want to be a co-captain, or they want to be a member. They don't want to be the one to have to yoke up when
this is a big, I think there's so many parallels between sports and business, and especially with leadership, and something that you learn playing sports growing up and being part of teams, and it, depending on how well different people play, you end up becoming a leader on those teams. And it's exactly what you said, where regardless of what happens in the game or with your teammates, like you defend everybody publicly, and then you handle everything else in the locker room, right? Like, all right, so maybe somebody did mess up really bad on some client work, but that doesn't mean you go to the client and throw them under the bus. You go to the client, you own it, you take responsibility, you protect your team, because they're not going to want to play for somebody who's throwing them under the bus. and getting out in front of that. And obviously there's ways to manage the relationships with the clients, but it's always to protect your team and then go back and then be able to handle it, diplomatically, inspirationally, whatever, so that those mistakes get corrected and they don't happen again. But I think, seeing people in business and leadership positions that didn't grow up in sports, it's I would love to see some kind of studies, and I'm sure there are, but it's amazing to see people who are just like more timid. They're in a leadership position from like job title, right? Like maybe they're like a president or whatever, but they just don't have that leadership capability that is really necessary, and something goes wrong and you see them like apologizing to clients and saying, oh well, so and so they didn't know that was happening and they won't do it again. And you can't do that. You have to say, like, I recognize this is a problem, I won't let it happen again, I'll handle it. Like, you are not allowed to go in and yell at my employee for screwing something up. Like, you got to be the front line, right? Yeah, like, I'm taking care of this.
That's knowing how to, if something goes bad, knowing when to step in. We just had a situation last week with one of our clients where I said, you need to put me on the email now. Now it's escalated to me, where there's nothing worse than having one of my folks have their career defined by somebody else who's outside of the organization that doesn't get what happens here. I said, and a lot of people here, they know, like, it's probably I was not the greatest athlete. I was a good athlete. I wasn't the greatest athlete. I captained a lot of teams because I was vocal. I have the whole Sicilian thing going on where I talk to hands, but like, I'm not afraid to speak up. And if that means us losing a client, or us, if somebody doesn't understand it, well, you know what? So be it.
Right.
My people are my people, and they're here because I saw something in them, or we saw something in them and I will defend them even if they're wrong. That's a huge part of being a good leader, at least to me. There are marketers who are smarter. There are marketers. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to be the most read CEO of a marketing company in the history of the world. But you know what? If somebody comes in here and they need the shirt off my back, or they need to talk, or they need somebody who's going to be able to have some accountability for something that's going on, or talk to them about a client who's giving them a hard time and they're on the verge of like a mental breakdown, have at it. Like, let's go. Game on.
Yeah. And that's and recognizing sometimes you have to be able to sacrifice clients, whether the client starts coming at you or you just recognize problems. Like the situation you just said, like we had a couple years ago, one day, one of my girls came in and she said, like, I had a nightmare last night about so-and-so, like, and that just put a flag up for me. And I was like, all right, like, screw this. We're getting rid of this guy. And I sent him an email that day and I was like, hey, like, appreciate your business. It's been a good run. Like,
we're done.
At the end of the month, we're done here. And that was it. Like, I'm like, if my team is having nightmares about somebody, like,
there are too many presidents and CEOs that are not willing to go to the mat and like ultimately sacrifice. There is no one, as Chris Berman used to say, circle the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. There is no one outside of these four walls that is bigger than any person here. And nobody, I don't care if you're an intern or our creative director, my partner, or our COO. I don't care if you're the COO.
Yeah.
Or the CFO. Nobody is bigger than our family. I know it's cliche, but we preach it. We are a family here.
Yeah.
And I know there's certain people that don't share the same opinion as me. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But when you're here, you're a part of our organization. You're a part of the family.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit too. Like, I think this goes into, building the team from a general manager position, right? Is that, there's people who, I think there's a combination that you need to look for to put the perfect puzzle pieces together, right? There's the culture fit, the personality types and that kind of thing. And then there's also the skill set. If you have 5 excellent 3-point shooters on the floor, but none of them pass the ball or rebound, like, it doesn't matter. So, talk about, like, how do you find the right people based on both of those things, and how do you figure out what roles you need to hire next, and how you make sure everybody kind of fits together?
Yeah, it's a great question. The early part of DSM was a lot of serendipity. That's what I like to call it.
Yeah.
Whether it was, meeting Ryerson through his girlfriend at the time, who was friends with my brother-in-law. He happened to be an account person who was looking, he was a creative who was looking for an account person. I was an account person looking for a creative, each working out of our houses. Or Christine, who heads up our traditional. She was the second person who we met through being on the board of an animal charity.
Right.
So the beginning part was more serendipitous, but it still had the backbone concept of like understanding what you're good at. Like I could do account stuff, but Christine was light years better than me. I can't do creative. So that was like the first hire I knew I had to make.
Yeah.
What DSM has become, or what we've become known for, as Leon's come on and Zinka's come on and Charlene's come on, it's become sort of an enclave for New York City expats who are striving for it really is, who are striving for a work-life balance.
Yeah.
One of the big parts of this company, when I started it, I started it for two reasons. The first was to have work-life balance, as I told you from the Jerry Maguire story.
Yeah.
Second was to coach football for fifth and sixth graders. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that if I was traveling. But as we've grown, it's not serendipitous anymore. There's a element of serendipity to it, with like Zinka reaching out on LinkedIn cold and being like, "Hey, I work for Condé Nast. I'm sick of the 18-hour days. Let's meet for lunch." And I was like, "Yo, we can't pay you what you make. Don't worry about it. Let's just meet."
Yeah.
But a lot of that structure has come as we've grown from 3 people, even one person, to 22. And now we're in the process of sort of doing more with less as we scale and hire more experienced people. The key to that is, and we have an executive team now, and we have a leadership team. We're building structure in the organization at different levels, and finding that talent is really, it's finding the right person, but it's talking through the executive team and then working through the leadership team to say, all right, here's what we're thinking, guys, about who the next hire is, what we need. And it's about keeping open lines of communication. That is huge to what we do here. We also, we try to have a really good internship program. If you go on our Glassdoor profile, a lot of the interns who have come through the program, you're not getting coffee here. You're through HubSpot. You're getting tool. We had a kid that graduated Ramapo in 3 years who went on to another gig in at the beginning of this year, or I'm sorry, in September, and he's like, I learned more in a year at DSM that I did in 4 years of 3 years of college. Yeah. So it's
colleges can't teach the stuff that agencies do today.
They can teach the traditional stuff that we do. It's a little different.
Yeah.
But with regards to the digital, they're light years behind.
Yeah, and it's impossible to keep up unless you're making a new curriculum every semester, which is still, by the time you get to the end, would be outdated from the beginning. So, that's also the importance of interns and of kids getting internships at agencies like DSM so that they can learn that stuff on the job. And you can only read and learn so much of it without actually getting your hands involved and sitting in the meetings and actually doing some work and seeing how the practice works of getting things out into the world. Because ultimately, when it comes to marketing, the market decides if you're going to be good or not,
And the other thing about it too that we're really proud of is that each of our interns leaves with like a portfolio of work. They're doing actual stuff. We have a kid, Chris, right now, who's with us. He's in high school. And he's working on a program. So he's working with us on some of the cannabis content that we're producing. With regards to armored vehicles and how that relates to the cannabis industry and how these companies like Brinks and all those guys. But on the other side of it, he's also working the campaign that I showed you earlier about Sal Loretta, our client Sal Loretta. We're launching 6 15-second vignettes over the next 6 weeks leading into their busy season from Black Friday through Christmas Eve. And Chris is going to be taking the charge with Enrico about how to do it. I mean,
that's amazing.
what high schooler is going to get that sort of opportunity to be able to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So I want to circle back. So you mentioned an executive team, right? And you have the CFO and COO there. So when you're building a business, you make your first couple of hires around delivering the services to your clients, right? And then kind of how did you grow and what roles did you hire? And at what point did you feel the need where you're like, oh shit, we need a COO, we need a CFO in here? Because that's like a big tipping point for a business when it goes, I mean, the small business definition by like the government standards is like $50 million a year or something like stupid. But like, when you go from a few people to a dozen or more, that's a huge jump in terms of running a business. So, at what point did you realize you needed the executive teams and what difference has it made?
I'll start with the difference it's made. Having somebody with financial experience come in and be able to handle the books. I've been able to understand a P&L, a balance sheet, all the prerequisites because I never went to B school. So I didn't know about any of this stuff. And working at a large agency, it was negotiating media. I was never involved in a P&L or a balance sheet. Yeah. So I've been able to understand these things and be better at them. Bringing a COO in place, bringing a CFO in place, bringing a sales guy in place. It goes back to fundamentally knowing and being comfortable enough to say, this is not my strong suit. I grew the company myself from nothing to $1.5 million. But if we want to get to 3 million, I need to give up these roles because I'm involved in the strategy of the company. I'm involved in, invoicing. It used to be a joke with my wife every month because we grew. Our growth in terms of people, we grew in 2012, we grew from 5 people to 22 people in 4 years. And we did a lot of things. Now that we're out of that, we did a lot of things right, and it was great. We did a ton of things wrong. But in that process, one of the things that I didn't do wrong was hiring Charlene to handle our books. Yeah. She's now set the books up. She marveled. She'd be like, how did you do all the company stuff and still come in and do the invoicing every month and remember all the stuff that was going on? Yeah. And I'd say, well, I pair it with going and watching Premier League soccer for 6 hours on a Saturday, in which I had kids. My wife would get super pissed at me. Yep. Oops, sorry. So basically what I did was it was getting to junctures in the company where I knew I needed help and I couldn't do everything myself. Yeah. And then understanding what that person looked like. So I'll with Charlene, it was easy. The company grew to $1.5 million over like 2 years. Yeah. And I realized very quickly, on top of having kids, that my wife was going to get super pissed at me if I spent 6 hours every day in the office or every month doing invoicing. Yeah. Thinka, it was a little bit different. I realized at the juncture of the company 1.5 years ago that I couldn't manage all the internal operations and be the face of DSM with regards to charitable organizations or, philanthropy, all the things that are really, really important to me. Mm. So bringing her in was an understanding like we need to divide and conquer. The company got way too big, way too fast, and we didn't have the proper levels of organizational structure. We just created we had the executive team that's 6 people now that helps me. That's like my cabinet. Yeah. Okay? They're in like the war room for the most sensitive stuff. Yeah. But leadership team now is 5 people that organizationally they're the eyes and ears of the agency. They're all sort of between 26 and 27 and 35. Mm-hmm. And they're that middle management that's helping us be the eyes and the ears, reporting back into the executive team that then when we sit down once every other week to have an executive committee meeting, they're my eyes and ears. But it's understanding, it's 2 parts. It's really, it boils down to being comfortable as a CEO or a president or an entrepreneur, knowing when the task is overwhelming and being comfortable enough to say, I can't do this as well as somebody else. And when you can get over those two hurdles, you can have a team of competent and professional people that are way better at what they do than what you do. And that's where the success is, I think.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about work-life balance throughout this conversation, and it sounds like, that was a priority for you in, years ago when you first started, and now it's like a major hot topic for companies and stuff like that. How do you kind of define work-life balance, and how have you seen it change from when you first started to like what people are looking for today, and like, with like the millennial workforce and all that kind of stuff people talk about?
Work-life balance to me has, if you can see, I'm just going to turn my computer a little bit. See those three? See those three right there in the upper corner? So when I first started this, work-life balance for me was being able to not travel. Work-life balance for me now is being able to, I'll give you the example today. Our furnace on our house is broken. Is being able to bring my kids to school, or be able to pick them up, or be available to see my daughter's Thanksgiving program tomorrow. Yeah. That whole balance changed. From what I've heard from our staff, one of the beautiful things of DSM for a lot of the people, as I said, we're sort of an enclave for New York City expats.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example with Zinka. To be able to, on a Friday afternoon, she has to pick up her kids because she doesn't have coverage. And she brings them here, and we have, pool and a scooter and, foosball. Ryan and Dylan just kind of jerk around in the office, and it's cool. Like, people, love them. My partner, Ryerson, he had his daughter, Kaden, last week, and Britt, who's one of our account managers, they were drawing together. I mean, that's the beauty of DSM. That's what I wanted, and that's how it's evolved for me as I've had kids. With regards to millennials, I think that work-life balance is important. I come from I'm 41, and I come from a different time. I mean, I had, when I worked at a big agency in New York, I had times where I literally worked 2 days straight. Yeah. Nobody cared. You just found an office, slept on a couch for 3 hours, and then you went to CVS, grabbed a mouthwash, a toothbrush, and you got back at it the next day in the same clothes, and that was just what was expected. Right. The work-life balance here, though, is very important to the fabric of the culture. I don't coach football anymore, although I'd really love to. I just don't have the time. But for me, it's super, super important to be able to offer that to our people, where if they need to work from home, they can. Yeah. And that's okay. As long as you're getting your stuff done, I'm great with it.
Yeah. It's what I've seen a lot, and, I work with a human capital management company as one of my clients. And so we're always talking about these topics, and it almost feels like when, because as a content marketer, I'm always looking to see what are the discussions going on within the target demographic and seeing what people are saying. And it almost, when I was in corporate, work-life balance was like a word where, there was a give and take, work from home if you need to, that kind of stuff. And then now it almost seems like people coming into the workforce, they call it work-life balance, but they're not compromising anything. It's almost like, well, if I have something come up and I need to be, not be at work, I should be able to just leave work. But they're missing the other half of like, well, now you need to make up on it.
Right. Well, it's got to be a balance too. It's got to be a give and take with regards to, it's got to be a give and take with regards to what you're willing to give as the person who's in charge. Yeah. Like I said, I'm available. We go through this all the time. We have different people at different levels of their lives here. So we have folks with kids that are married. We have folks that that are married that don't have kids. And it's making sure that you communicate well, because a lot of the allure for the 6 of us that have kids, or the 7 of us that have kids, is having the flexibility to pick a sick kid from school up. But that doesn't, for the people that are here until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, if you need us, you have to be available. Right. So it's a delicate balance. You can't go off the grid either.
Right. That's right. So that's another thing with like today's world, where like, I like to think instead of a work-life balance where there's a give and take, it's more of a work-life integration, right? Where like, yeah, you have to leave and pick up your kid from school. That's cool. But like, something, you also have a computer at home. So now when you're home, if somebody needs something, you're available to kind of, still get things done. And but then there becomes the point where like, so when does it turn off? And how do you make sure your employees aren't, approaching burnout where, okay, you go home, you have dinner, and then you open your laptop while you're watching the game, but now you're working again all night, and then you wake up, and like it just becomes a cycle of like struggling to turn off. So how do you manage that kind of stuff?
What I try to do, for me, I'll keep this as simple as possible. For me, it doesn't turn off ever.
Right.
Part of why I think clients come to us, I give them my cell phone and I am available 24/7.
Yeah.
That's it. And to a certain degree, if you can't find me, like my wife and I just went to Mexico for a vacation at the end of October for a long weekend. I was on email every day. I had my laptop. Everything comes with me.
Yep.
As I built things out, I have people now here that will allow me to step away during the day. They kept a lot of stuff from me they didn't keep a lot of stuff. They managed it for me.
Right.
And when I got back, there were certain things that I had to put together, but there's no work-life balance for me as much as I try to do it. And my big thing now is I try to be home every night for dinner.
Yeah.
I try to get out of here 5:30, 6 o'clock. I try to get home for dinner. And then after that, we put the kids to bed, 8:30, whatever it is. I'm back on.
Right.
I mean, exactly. You and I are
we're talking
at like 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that's cool. With regards to the people here, I try to tell them to turn off, and I try to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
If I need somebody, I tell them, please just make sure you answer your phone. But, in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of stuff that I just feel like I can handle. Yeah. Or, Zinka or Ryerson or Leon or Christine, Charlene, we can handle as a team that we don't have to bother people on the weekends. Yeah. And it's a matter of work-life balance, with regards to tomorrow. We're letting people out early, at 3. They're going home.
For people who are watching, tomorrow is the day before Thanksgiving.
All right. It's 3 o'clock, we're letting people out, but on the other side of it, I'll be working all night. If something comes up or, we're a digital based agency. If a client's website goes down, somebody's getting a call or a Slack, we got to fix it. And if you provide a balance where people feel respected, where you're not badgering them on a weekend, if something does come up that's dire and you reach out, they know it's really, really important.
Right.
And they're willing to do it. Yeah. Now, if it's 3 o'clock on Thursday and it's Thanksgiving, they might have to wait, but until later that night until they get home or whatever. I don't know if they're taking their laptops to Thanksgiving. But if you're respectful and you give people space, I feel like they're more responsive to
so let's
does
tie
come
that
up,
into
the
last topic here and talk about
like
from the mistakes that you made and learned in growing the business, and now you have the executive team. What are some of the major things that you've implemented over the last, let's say, year and a half that have made a huge difference for you as the business leader to make your life maybe a little easier, a little more efficient, that you didn't have before as you've grown?
It's very easy. We're a service-based business, and the people that are on the executive team, the systems, the connection of the leadership team as they get closer to the executive team and as communication gets better, the systems are better, and we've cleaned up a lot of things that were imminent or that were happening earlier on in 2018. So we've cleaned up a lot in terms of simplifying things here. We've had conversations about this. Having the people in a service-based business, the right people that work with you and understand what you're trying to do is the most important. So having a COO in place over the last year and a half and understanding that I couldn't do both. I couldn't focus on the internal workings of the agency organizationally and the external has made my life it made my life a lot simpler. Zinga, having her in place with regards to the internal workings of the agency, if something big comes up, obviously, like I'll go back to the Mexican, the long weekend in Mexico. Nobody bothered me. They were able to. I was able to enjoy a vacation with my wife. If you're talking 6 years ago, that never would have happened. When we were 7 people. And that organizational structure with somebody who could manage something from start to finish, and be able to make it, who is comfortable enough to make a decision. And it's like a professional sports team. You could have, all right, let's take, I'm a big Villanova fan. They're having a disastrous early season right now. They got smoked by Michigan last week, and they got beat by Furman on Saturday. Like, over the last 5 years, that's the first time in the last 5 years that they've lost 2 games in a row. And they lost them on their home floor because of the culture and organization and structure that Jay Wright's built at Villanova. If you build that the right way, it's going to bear out fruit. But if you have 4 first rounders go to the NBA, you're still going to have, early on in the season, I guarantee if Villanova is a much better team by the end of the year, because it still takes time for the new components to gel. And so I think that over time, Zinga and I have a lot of the same qualities, but she still challenges me on a lot of the stuff. Charlene is the same way. Leon handling the sales, it's a lot of the same way. You have to find people that understand what you do, but that are also comfortable enough and strong enough to challenge you. Ryerson and I were very different people, but I know that he's got a gift from God that I could never have. Like, creatively, I'd put him in a room with any creative agency going back to my days at Satachi and Satachi. That's God-given and talented.
I agree.
But with all the God-given talent in the
look
world,
at the New England Patriots as an example. You have
going back to the
right
Villanova example,
that can be
that
can last a long time.
They're not the most,
but they still have to make adjustments every game, every quarter.
John Calipari gets 5 one and done.
Tom Brady, but he missed the whole season, and Matt Castle, who has done nothing since,
Kansas,
I forget, they were
on the other side of it,
that year.
Villanova won the national championship.
The combination of, like, you do need, you need a certain level of talent to have table stakes in the game, but then it's about, having the right culture and commitment to each other and chemistry among everybody on the field and on the team.
No individual
everybody headed in the right direction. on the right path. So.
That's what this company is all about, and that's the message that I want us to embody as individuals, as professionals, but that family feel, that's like a real thing. And people in a world of business right now that a lot of jobs just suck the life out of people, like this is, Todd, you know it as much as I do. This is a hard job. Yeah. What you do marketing, there's a ton of competition. There's a ton of good people. It's how you make it's how you differentiate your organization with the intangibles. That's it. Because a company here, they could go any. I mean, we're blessed to live in a place that's one of the most highly densely populated places in the country. There's business everywhere. There's competition everywhere. What differentiates you? It's going to be about people. It's going to be about the service. It's going to be about how well you do. It's going to be to a certain extent about talent. But you could have the greatest talent in the world, and you could be a total disaster. So
yeah, that's awesome. So is that it'll be an orange wedding then? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Huh.
It's no different than a family. You know, I grew up as an only child, but as I've grown in this company, it's allowed me to understand that I have to be willing to give and take. And it's not in my nature to do that, because as an alpha, like, if something goes wrong, I only want to have myself to blame. On the other side of that, though, there's so many ideas that have come out of the last 12 years, and I think the biggest look. I guess in another life, I could have stayed in the city and been making a ton more money and not have the things that are the most important to me. The relationships that I've made in 12 years of DSM, they are relationships that'll stay with me the rest of my life. And that's the beauty of this place. Money is important. Everybody needs to be making money to make sure they take care of their family and whatever. But philanthropy will always be a big part of this company. You know, the stuff we do with Divas.
Well, this has been great. I mean, we had so many different key topics, I think, for people growing their business from 1 to 3 to 25 and back down. And, you know, there's so much in here to unpack for people. So
and that
doesn't be something that entrepreneurs need to watch a couple
displace
times,
money as
and
something
definitely
that
something
needs
for anybody
to,
in
you know,
North
you
Jersey who
need
wants
to make sure
to,
people are making
find
a
a really great
good
business to
living
work
and
with.
taking care of
I
their
think your
families. That's
passion
important.
and experience
But on
here
the
that you
other
express
side
is
of it,
just a testament
there's
to the
so many
organization.
relationships and
And
value.
thank you very much.
I
I'm sure
mean,
we'll have you back on at some
we
point to dive
have
deeper into
people that
one of the many topics that you hit on
came
today.
through this place over the last 12 years that you know, are potentially on the verge of getting married. They met at DSM and they get married. Like, how cool is that? So that's been a big.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
I don't think it'll be an orange wedding. But but
I'm sure they're linked on the website.
It's cool to see that happen.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the biggest wins of my career. You know, to be able to, like, my epitaph is written. Like, I led this organization. Whether we win, we lose, whatever happens from here on out, we've already been successful. I'm reading a great book right now. Not to keep rambling, but I'm reading a great book by this guy, Maynard Webb, called Dear Founder. And this guy was like a mentor to
All right, thank you, Darren, so much for joining us. There was just a ton of value in there about how to build a successful, sustainable business, which is what we are all about, helping you at the Growth Suite. And for more resources that you can get for free, check out thegrowthsuite.com/subscribe to get guides and worksheets and exercises that will help you plan the marketing strategies that will attract more customers to your brand so that you can fund the growth of all those hires that we talked about and turn you into a great leader and entrepreneur. So that's thegrowthsuite.com/subscribe to get those free resources. Check Darren out at thedsmgroup.com and connect with him on LinkedIn, and check out other episodes of Growth Suite TV at thegrowthsuite.com/TV, and I'll catch you on the next episode.